Hey guys, Matt here. This is my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This movie is directed by James Gunn, who previously directed the other two Guardians films. This movie stars the group of Guardians that we've come to know and love. The plot of this movie is quite simple. The Guardians of the Galaxy are protecting their friend Rocket from a man known as the High Evolutionary. Going into this movie, my only thoughts were that, hey, they're finally making a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie. Because I thought that we were only going to get them post Endgame in either shorts, like the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, the I Am Groot miniseries, and the cameos in Thor Love and Thunder. But I didn't think we were getting an actual Guardians 3 movie. Well, I should have known better because here we are. So going into it, I was expecting it to be the characters that we've come to know. I was expecting it to be fun, have a booming, enjoyable soundtrack, but also wrap up the franchise as a whole. Did we get that? Well, we got most of it. I would say, in a nutshell, this movie is bittersweet. So, this review is going to be shorter than the rest because there's not a whole lot of ways to describe this movie. Because, to be honest, this movie isn't fun. Now, I'm not saying there aren't enjoyable moments or moments that will make you laugh, cry, or smile, but this film, unlike the other two Guardians movies, feels like what the DCEU became after Zack Snyder made some movies. It just felt bleak and dark, and there was no fun. There was really no adventure anymore. And that's kind of what this third movie felt like. It felt like it was just building towards the wrapping up of the Guardians and the end or beginning of Phase 5. This movie is centered around Rocket. This is a Rocket heavy movie, including his backstory, his origins, and going back and forth between flashbacks. This movie shows you how Rocket became who he is. Now, granted, I would have much preferred a Rocket meeting Groot flashback or two. That would have been more hopeful and more enjoyable, but here we are shown the things that are done to Rocket physically. We are shown all the mental things that this poor little creature goes through, and we're shown how he met and interacted with the High Evolutionary. Now, the High Evolutionary as a villain is really good. Not since Thanos have we had a villain like this where you're like, oh man, I want to see you get punished real bad. There are no redeeming qualities for this villain. Now, he does have his mindset of why he thinks he's doing things the right way, but in all actuality, he's just hurting things, trying to make them better than they are. Now, as far as the acting goes for the Guardians, it's fine. I would say there are story arcs for every single one of them, which is really good, but this movie is more or less the Guardians copy and paste from the other movies, and then it's not until the third act do they actually start to change or become other people. Chris Pratt is fine as Star-Lord. Mantis is in this as well. So is Drax. So is Nebula. And so is Gamora. Why? Because you have to have all the Guardians in the third Guardians movie. Now, this movie is quite the mixed bag as far as the acting goes. Like, Gamora is in this, but she's not really attached to the Guardians as she was before, because it's a different version of Gamora. This movie should have been a short on a TV show or something, because it felt like this movie was just made and padded to wrap up the story arc that is the Guardians. It didn't feel like a movie. In this one, the Guardians can be described as simply one way. You have the human leader, you have the dumb one, you have the emotional one, you have the angry one, you have the smart one, and then you have Gamora, a member of the Guardians like she was before, but she doesn't really want to be part of the group, and she never really feels attached to them. She accepts and acknowledges who they are by the end of the movie, but she's just there. Again, this movie was really just made to wrap up the franchise that is Guardians of the Galaxy as we know them. This movie is dark. Now, as I said before, in the third act, these characters do undergo some sort of change, but it's realistically a lot like the Fantastic Four movie that we got, where Yeah, in name they're the same characters, but it's really not until the end that you see that change. You see what you've come to watch the movie for. Not until the third act where they're all like, "Hey, guess what? Guardians are done." Also, this movie, like a lot of the MCU at this point, has like required reading or required watching to kind of fill in some holes and gaps from before. There are a couple characters in this movie that you don't know who they are or why they are there unless you've seen the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. And that's not exactly what you want out of a franchise. So, because these characters are dealing with their past. They're dealing with who they need to become moving forward. You know, for example, Star-Lord. He has to deal with moving on past Gamora because his whole thing, his love story, has been with Gamora. And I do feel that this movie had a bunch of the Guardians, aside from Rocket, just there. The first two Guardians films were about Chris Pratt, his mom, his family, what his life is like after meeting these new people. This third movie is so focused on Rocket and the bad guy that the rest of them are just there doing their normal things until the third act. And also, Adam Warlock is in this movie. I'm sorry, I almost forgot, but he is wasted. He is just one of those henchmen where it's like, oh, okay, boss, I'll go take care of it. Where he doesn't really have a whole lot to do except for finishing the story arc that was started in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And that's it. And I apologize if I'm being super negative in this review. I don't mean to. It's just this movie was unlike the ones we've got before. Yes, it has songs that are enjoyable, but honestly, aside from three of them, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, Creep, and Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine, I didn't recognize any of them. The songs fit the mood of this scene, but it wasn't joyous, it wasn't happy. And realistically, there aren't any notable songs in this franchise except for maybe one at the end of Guardians 2 and Redbone's Come and Get Your Love at the beginning of the first film. At least to me. So, if you're a fan of the Guardians, I would say check this movie out because it does wrap it up and it does provide some things of what to expect going forward. But this movie is darker and, as I said, bittersweet as opposed to the other two films. And so, because of that, because the acting is good, the characters do develop late into the film, but it's a lot of the James Gunn humor and slapstick and some violence that you'd expect. I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a B-. So, until next time, guys.